Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Night Caller's Bigfoot Radio. It is December 4th, I believe, or 5th. No, it's December 5th, 2016, and we're so glad to be here tonight. Wow, what an odyssey. We have stepped off into the twilight zone of Blog Talk Radio, and it's been quite insane. In fact, I think this is the second time we've listened to the intro tonight. The first show, I don't know. Anyway, we're so glad to be here. Lauren, are you here?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're sounding a little bit like Darth Vader. You're going to have to back off that mic a bit.
How's that?
That's better. That's better. We want to let everyone know that Jeff is not going to be here tonight. Jeff is very, very sick, and he has West Nile. So he is not doing well. He needs prayer. He's going to survive, but it's just going to take a while for him to get over that. So I don't know. Maybe he'll be back next week. But let's just keep him in our prayers, everyone, and we're looking forward to a good show tonight. Mm-hmm. So, wow. Is that the youngest one?
Yes, I have a new headset, and apparently it's extremely sensitive because he's across the room.
Yeah, wow, it is. It truly is. So, is there any way that you can, I don't know what you could do.
I keep telling you to send me some dang tranquilizers, and you won't, so you're going to have to deal with it. Like, if anybody wants to send them to me, send them. If not, you have to deal with my baby because I don't know what else to do.
You wouldn't give that baby tranquilizers. You know you wouldn't do that. So he's okay. Fine. Right. I tell you what. If you would read the intro, and we'll go ahead and bring Mark on, and then you can mute out and get that baby to sleep, and me and Mark will have a real nice interview. And when you get ready to come back, you just come on back, okay?
Okay, well, okay. All right. Night Caller's Bigfoot Radio presents Mark Mills of Ohio. Mark Mills has been researching Bigfoot since 1998. When he was a child, his dad took him to see Legend of Boggy Creek. Mark moved to Ohio in 1993 from Florida. In March of 93, a friend of his gave him a clipping from the Columbus Dispatch newspaper, and it was an article talking about Bigfoot sightings in Ohio in the previous year of 1997. Mark was fired up to go out and look for himself. For Bigfoot himself. Okay. He first attended a Bigfoot conference in Coshocton, Ohio, to get some info on the subject. Then he went and got a topo map of the area of Coshocton and started to do research there. The very first day he found a 3-toed print. Wow, that's pretty impressive. I've never found a print, and I've been doing this since I was like 10. Okay. His first encounter took place in May of 1998 in Wayne National Forest, and he has had multiple experiences. His reports can be read on the BFRO website, report number 3589, report number 3686, and report number 3767. Mark Mills can be located on his personal Facebook page.
Okay. Lauren, is there any way you can turn the volume down just a little?
No, I enjoy being super loud in everybody's ear.
You really are. I mean, I had to pull you away from my head. But that's okay. We didn't have a chance, folks, to do our audio check like we normally do. Yeah. I just hope our guest comes on and he's not like talking like a flea and can barely hear him. But I think he should be okay. Let's go ahead and bring on Mark. And Lauren, we'll talk to you in a little bit, okay, hon?
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye. Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing tonight?
You really don't want me to answer that. I am so glad, though, that you made it on, and that was just crazy. We couldn't unmute people, and I apologize. that is insane. Just the whole thing was insane. We had one show come up. It had played the intermission and everything, and we couldn't get anybody to unmute. And then they took that show down, put another show up, played the intermission again. It was just like, wow, Twilight Zone, big time. But you're here, and I'm so glad. And basically we have read about how you got a beginning. I listened to you on Abe's show, and you have just got a fascinating story. And if you don't mind, just tell us from the beginning when you first started having an experience with the Sasquatch, if you don't mind. Just start
My
right
very
there.
first encounter
In May of 1998. Yeah.
Yeah, me and a friend decided we was going to go camping, and I never camped in Ohio. And he said, well, my grandpa's got some land down here in southeast Ohio. At that time, I was living in Columbus, Ohio. I said, that sounds pretty neat. Well, I'll go check it out because I never camped in Ohio, so we decided to head down there. And it actually ended up being in Wayne National Forest, down in a little town called Hoadley, which is like maybe 2 houses on the map. That's the town. It is. It's in the boonies. It's like 20 minutes south of Lake Jackson.
Okay.
And
well,
we're
Wayne
down
National
there.
Forest is a very hot area, from what I understand. We've had several researchers on here from Ohio, and they've all had significant experiences in Wayne National Forest. So I'm excited to hear your story, and I'll shut up and let you go. Go ahead.
Well, that's fine. Well, see, Wayne National Forest, that's the only true forest left in Ohio that's still the original trees from way back in the pioneer days where David Crockett and Daniel Boone used to run through. So you still got mature trees down in them woods that are huge compared to the rest of Ohio. Like the other 90%'s been chopped down for farmlands. But the Wayne National Forest are actually still the main woods in Ohio. There's 3 groups of them. And this particular one was down there in Gallia County, which is like southeast Ohio. And so anyways, it was a Friday night. It was Memorial Day weekend, and my buddy's like, hey, we ought to go camping. I was like, okay, well, let's go. So we packed up. Took us about 3... It's probably about a 3.5-hour ride from Columbus, like southeast. And then on the way, we stopped and got groceries because we figured we'd be there for the 3-day holiday. And the first night we get there, I was shocked because we had to hike from his grandpa's, like, trailer to up this ridge to this overhang. And this overhang, to kind of give you an idea, was probably from the edge to the back wall, 15 feet deep. From the ground, you could just about touch the ceiling standing. I'm 5'8", so it's probably about 6 foot, a little over 6 foot high ceiling. And then to give you an imagine, if you had cut like a third off of a car tire and just shoved it in a mountain back in a valley, that's what this was like. It was a good sized little area. It took us three trips to carry our gear from the car back to this overhang. Time we got there was midnight. Time we got settled down was like 2 in the morning.
Wow.
And I was just amazed because this is the first time I ever camped in Ohio, period. And back in them days, for lighting, all you had was them pop-up Coleman lanterns with the white gas, and you just had D-cell battery flashlights. We didn't have technology like they do today. So it was still primitive camping.
Yeah,
it's still primitive camping back then when we went. So we get there, like I said, about 2 in the morning. Time we get settled, blow up my air mattress. He made him a little tent, and we climbed and went to sleep. And that was about it. Time we hit the hay was about 4 in the morning. Well, the next morning we wake up. It's probably like 8 in the morning, and I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. This is like in the boonies because you get to see what the area looks like at that point, because when you go in the dark, pitch black, next morning is like a new world. So anyways, I threw a Coke can out in the woods and I shot it with my shotgun because I wanted to try this new shotgun I had. My buddy, he got a 45, so he's bam, 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 bam. So we're shooting. And all this plays out to later in the story.
Mhm.
And then
And this is at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, or is this the next day?
No, this is the next morning. The sun's coming up, so we just shoot our guns. We make breakfast. We go wandering through the woods during the day. We gather some firewood because we wanted to cook some steaks over a stick fire that night. So we was rounding up like some cherry and oak wood. And then after we gathered some wood, man, we shot all of our ammunition because we went crazy. And I only brought like I don't know, maybe 10 rounds of shot shell, and he shot through like 20 rounds for his 45. So we're like, man, I don't want to be out here without no ammunition because we're in the middle of Wayne National Forest. So like, I don't want to be out here trapped at night with no ammunition, period. So we decided to go ride to Lake Jackson Lake, which is, like I said, about 20 minutes away through, got to meander through all these back roads to get there. And we find this little convenience country store. And we go in there and get some more ammunition, and this guy was high. We're like, wow, this guy's high on his prices. And he's like, well, either you pay that or leave. We're like, well, we'll get it and see you. So we went back to camp. So we went back to camp, and we shot a couple more rounds. By then, my arm was black and blue, and Greg was done shooting. So we said, well, let's make some lunch. So we made some lunch and had a couple of sandwiches. And then again, we're exploring around the woods, getting some more firewood because we really wanted to have enough wood for the night's fire. So we went and hauled in some logs. Well, during the day, Greg would say, hey, Mark, over here, check this out. Hey, Mark, over here. So he's calling my name all day. I'm like, okay. So I go there and we check it out. Well, then the evening comes. This is where stuff starts getting interesting. Because I got to tell you where we're at is the nearest house in any direction on this back gravel road was like 4 miles one way or the other. We was like in the middle. And we was up on this hill, good distance up on this hill in this overhang. Probably from the overhang to the gravel road down below was probably 100 yards. And then from
I have a couple of questions real quick, Mark. First question is, were you there to research Bigfoot?
No. We went there just to camp.
Okay.
Like I said, that's the first time I ever camped in Ohio. Okay.
And the second question is, your friend, who this was his grandfather's property, had he ever had any experiences there? He did.
No, well, that'll come up in the story later what he's experienced there. He never told me nothing until this time we went there. We just went there to camp and shoot guns. That was our main goal, was just to have a relaxing weekend. We weren't even looking for Bigfoot. This was just, let's go camping on your grandpa's property and shoot guns and kick back for the weekend. Basically a guy's camp out. That's all it was. We weren't looking for Bigfoot. That wasn't even in our minds. Well, later on that evening, like I said, we dragged some logs up there. So we chopped on a few logs and we started the fire about 5 o'clock that evening. And we had cherry wood going, so we burnt the cherry wood down till we had these big red hot glowing coals. And then we had this old grate we brought and made rocks and stuck it over on each side of the fire so it burned all the rust off and try to clean the grate off because it had been there I don't know how many years. So finally we got that burned off and we wrapped up some potatoes and aluminum foil and corn on the cob and aluminum foil and threw them in the coals. And then we took some steaks and just slapped them on that grill. So you know the smoke from steaks cooking in the boonies got to travel. So we're sitting there just cooking, and I'm like, we're definitely in the boonies because even on that gravel road, I bet the whole day only 3 cars went by. That's how desolate this place is. So we get dinner done, we eat. We was done eating, we took him through the scraps down the hill. And like the potato skins and the corn cobs and whatever fat, we just threw it down the hill. We're like, well, we'll let the critters eat. So he went out there, Greg, that was my friend's name at the time. He starts chopping on this tree. Just chop with an axe. Chop. Chop. And you know how an axe sounds when you're chopping on wood with an axe. It kind of travels too. Well, this particular evening, like I say, May, so you're starting to hit summer where there ain't really no wind out in there. So it's pretty quiet, so you know sound's really traveling real far. It's not a heavy wind, just, you know, a basic drifting wind, nothing major. So as it starts getting darker, I turned on this boom box because years ago they drug a picnic table under this overhang. And so what I did was I set my boom box on there, took like 8D batteries, and I just was jamming out my boom box, listening to some local station. And Greg's out there chopping on wood for the night's fire, you know, throwing it on the fire as he goes. And while he's chopping, it's starting to really get dark now. It's like 9 o'clock, so the sun's starting to go down. And when you're under the canopies of trees, it gets dark early in there. I mean, pitch dark. Because you're in the deep forest. I mean, it was dark. Well, he was sitting there chopping. And I said, well, I'm going to turn on my boom box, boom, ba-doom, ba-doom, ba-doom. And it's like 15 minutes later, and I heard this branch just go snap right over the radio while Greg's chopping. And I'm like, oh, my Lord, what was that? So I turned the radio off immediately, and I go, Greg. He goes, what? I said, did you hear that? He goes, what? I said, did you hear that branch snap? He goes, I didn't hear nothing. I said, well, I'm not playing the radio no more tonight. I'm done with the radio. Turned it off. And then, so Greg came in the overhang and sat down. And I said, well, I'm going to go out and chop on some wood for a minute. So I went out there, started chopping on some wood on that tree. I bet I chopped for about 10 minutes. And I said, well, I'm done. We got enough fire. So I went and sat next to Greg in the overhang. And about the time I sat down, all of a sudden you heard this, I don't know how to describe it, but a big, just like a heavy thump or something just got thumped on the ground. And whatever thumped on the ground, to me it sounded like something picked up this old rotten tree that fell and went over and picked up like one end of the tree, lifted up and just slammed it down to the earth and just shook the ground. And actually, the ground under our feet and the overhang even shook. So whatever it was very forceful.
Gosh.
So Greg looked at me, and I looked at him. And I grabbed my shotgun, started loading it up. He goes 45. And we got out our little TD cell flashlights, and we started looking around in the woods. I looked high, looked low, I looked high. We did this for about an hour. So after about an hour, which was probably somewhere like 9:30 at this time, I can't remember exactly, but we just said, well, let's kick back. We don't hear nothing. We don't see nothing. So we went back to relax mode. Well, I'd say about 1:45, Greg's like, I'm going to lay down. I said, you are? I said, okay, well, good night. So he made a cot, and he was probably 10 minutes away from me, and he's laying down on this cot. And so where I was, I had my back against the overhang wall, and on the picnic table where my boombox was, I took me some paper towels and made a blind because I fired up that lantern that you had to pump. And so the lantern's going. I made a blind where you couldn't see me sitting in the back with my back to the wall because it kind of made a dark area in the overhang. But you could see my buddy Greg about 15 feet away from me out there plain as day. And he starts snoring. I kid you not. This guy snored so loud, it's the loudest snore I've ever heard in my life. I was like, oh, my God. I'm telling you, this guy snored so loud, he's probably the world record. So I started panicking a little bit, and I was like, man, I think his snore is going to attract the bear. What if that's a bear? There might be a bear out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the shotgun across my lap while I'm sitting here. And keep my flashlight in my right hand. Because I was like, if that's a bear and he's snoring, it might come see us. And I'm like, that won't be cool, see. So he's just laying out over there snoring away. And so I would take that flashlight because whatever snapped that branch earlier in the night and made that thump had my attention. Because I've been in the woods since I was a little kid. I never heard anything like them sounds. So what I would do is take my flashlight and pass it low along the ground and high up in the trees, about 5 or 6 foot. Because mind you, I'm looking down and down the mountain or hill kind of thing, at least 100 yards down. So, well, like I said, it's about 1:45 when he fell asleep. Well, this is where the night changed for something different, because I would do a pass like every 5 minutes when he went to sleep, because like I said, that snoring had my attention. Well, about 10 minutes to 1 in the morning, I was doing a pass to my left, sweeping. To kind of give you an idea of how this land laid in there, to get in the overhang, you had to go down this 10-foot straight down little trail to get in the overhang. And then there's kind of like a little shelf up there. But both sides of it, from the right and left, they kind of went down into a V. So it wasn't like it was just a flat hill underneath us. It went down in this little valley like a V because the water washed it out over the years. So when I was passing to my left about 30 yards away, I saw these pair of eyeballs. I kid you not. They remind me of an old King Kong movie on TV when I was a kid, when you saw the black and white eyes of King Kong. These were huge eyes. At that distance away, they looked like golf balls, and they were fully open with blue eyes, fully dilated, and they were looking at me. And when I hit it with my flashlight, it just turned its head to look away. And so I freaked out, and I ran over to my buddy Greg, and I started shaking. I was like, Greg, wake up. There's something in the woods. Greg, wake up. He kind of sits up and was like, look, man, look. And he passed back out and went back to sleep. So I'm like, well, he's no
like
help, man. This dude is no help.
It's like a movie.
It was like a movie, I'm telling you. It goes on from there. So after he laid back down, I'm like, well, this ain't cool, man. Whatever I saw them eyes, I've never seen eyes staring straight at me for a second like that, because usually most animals' eyes are to one side, the other side of their head. And this thing was staring directly at me for a second before it whipped its head to the left. And Greg wouldn't wake up, so I'm kind of, my heart's starting to beat a little bit. I'm like, what was that? What was that I just saw? What kind of eyes? And off the ground, I would guesstimate they were between 7 and 8 foot up, but I just couldn't tell because the land's going downhill at that area. So I'm just sitting there thinking, what was that? That can't be a bear. I don't think bears have blue eyes like a human or an ape or something, because that's what they remind me of, just like a big ape. They were so far apart and so big at that distance. So I would say about 35 minutes goes by, and whatever was over here to my right, where the tree branch snapped in that thump, it must have went down the valley and up the valley over here to my right side, and when it did, it either climbed up a tree and sat on a branch and put its arm around the tree and grabbed the branch and started going, or it found maybe a tree 4 or 5 inches around and was shaking it. But whatever it found, it was shaking it like saying, get out of my woods. That's what I was taking from that thing shaking the tree. And it did it for like 30 minutes straight, like trying to intimidate us or intimidate me. And then
there was no wind and nothing else moving.
No wind, no breeze. What happened was before all that happened, you could hear a whippoorwill as it was getting dark. It was running around through the woods going, whippoorwill, 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 because that's what they sound like.
Yeah.
And then we heard an owl, whippoorwill. So, we didn't think of stuff, but then as the night went on, things were getting stranger. So when that tree stopped shaking, I ran over to my buddy Greg, and I'm like, Greg, wake up, I'm scared, man. wake up, I'm scared, there's something in the woods. He sits up for about 5 minutes in the day. He's like, ugh, passes back out. So by this time, my heart's really popping, going, doo, 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 doo. Well, whatever shook that tree, I would say after 10, 15 minutes, decided it was going to walk back down the valley and come back up to my left again. And when it was walking, I kid you not, it sounded like King Kong. There's no other sound to describe this. Because every time it would put a foot down, it would actually crunch the sticks before the weight would hit the ground. It was like a I can't even describe it, but if you can only imagine twigs being smashed under heavy load and then a thump. That's how heavy this thing was. And so what it did was I had this throwaway camera, and I'd let it get about 4 or 5 steps, and I'd take a picture, and then it would stop dead like I just messed up its night vision. And it would sit there for about 5 or 10 minutes, like trying to get its night vision back. And then it'd start again. Whatever it was, it took 45 minutes from the time it started to the time it got back over to my left before it got quiet again. And then it got quiet. And I mean deathly quiet. It was so quiet that it was eerie quiet. Wasn't even no crickets, no nothing. You're like, wow, this is just too quiet.
That's when it's really scary.
When
silence
spooky.
is noisy. Yeah.
That's when that's when you know something's going on. When it's that spooky, deathly quiet, and you're starting to get the heebie-jeebies, you know there's something going on. So now I'm sitting here figuring, what in the world is that? Is that a Bigfoot? There's got to be a Bigfoot, because I never experienced Bigfoot. Never heard nobody talk one that was that heavy, making these sounds. And so in my head, I'm thinking, it can't be a bear, because bears probably do shake trees, but I've never heard a bear sound like somebody walking on 2 feet. It's like King Kong. It's the only way I can describe it. It was that heavy. So then it got quiet. And the next thing it did that freaked me out, to this day I still, think about it. It was mimicking my name, going, rock, Mark, rock, rock. 6 times real guttural low, and that was freaking me out bad. That freaked me out so bad. I'm like, I don't know any animal in the woods that can mimic a person other than a person. So that had me freaking right there. My hair raised up on my neck and my arms. I started freaking bad.
You didn't dump cold water on your friend to wake him up by then? I believe
No, because he was bait at that time. When he wouldn't get up, he was bait. That's why I kept watching him, because earlier night I figured whatever it was would come try to grab him, and I was just going to shoot it down. But it didn't do that. It started doing terrorism. That's what I'm saying. And then when it made my name, people go, well, how did it know your name? And that's when I get back to when we were in the woods earlier in the day after we'd been shooting guns, and he said, hey, Mark, over here. Hey, Mark, over here. So apparently shooting guns attracts Bigfoot. And the reason I say that is because if you go to Alaska now, that the polar bears associate gunshots with entrails. That's how smart a polar bear is. They come running when they hear that. So now I'm wondering if these Bigfoots has picked up on fallen hunters, that they're going to leave entrails. So that us shooting attracted this one to our location. That, or who knows, maybe the overhangs, it's bad. Who knew at this time?
Or it could have been curiosity.
Yeah, we were just there to camp. That's all it was. We went to camp. We weren't even hunting a Bigfoot. Well, after it mimicked my name 6 times, then it got quiet again. By this time, it's probably 4 in the morning. And I'm just sitting here freaking out going, what kind of animal can mimic a human? That's what freaked me out.
Yeah.
Well, then, the next thing I know, it apparently climbed on top of the overhang. And what it did was it tried to sniff me out, I guess, because we had a campfire going earlier in the night right outside the overhang. And this thing apparently tried to lean over the overhang and try to sniff me out or something. I don't know why, but it was it was wanting to do a sniff, and when it did, it put its head right in the smoke. And when it did, it sneezed. And the only way I can describe the lung power is if you ever heard them horses go, it had lungs like a horse. And when it sneezed, it went, kind of like that. But you had to have been there to really experience, and that freaked me out bad. I was like, oh, my God, this can't be a bear. It's got to be a Bigfoot. So then, about this time, I'm freaking out really bad, and I didn't know what to do. So I turned to my boombox, and I turned the volume full up, and I turned it on, and I just let it blare because I'm like, whatever this thing is, it's got to go. It's got to go, and the only thing I can figure is if I can make myself look bigger, it's going to leave. That's the only thing I can figure. So I turned on the radio and just let it blare for like 15 minutes straight, and then I turned it off, and I was listening. And I could still hear leaves moving on top of the overhang, like it was just standing there or walking around. Like that didn't even freak it out. And I'm like, oh, my God, I'm in trouble now. Because when it was saying Mark, rock, rock, the only thing going through my head was it was telling me it's going to get a rock and rock me. That's all I was thinking the rest of the night. It's going to rock me with the rock, and now it's on top of the overhang, so it's probably going to jump off and get a rock and just rock me. That was the only communication I was getting out of that Mark, rock, rock. That freaked me out so bad. So about that time, after it did that, and it got quiet for about 15 minutes, and then it did a grunt. It did this deep grunt, went, but I can't even describe how deep a grunt it was. It was so guttural deep, but it did 3 grunts, kind of like if you ever heard a gator.
Yeah.
And when it did that, I freaked out, and I went over and turned the radio on again and just let it blare like 20 minutes this time, just let it go. Because I was like, what do I do now? What do I do now? How am I going to get rid of this thing? So I turned it off.
What kind of music were you playing?
It was rock and roll.
Rock and roll?
Just whatever. Yeah,
maybe that's what he
was
wanting you to do. Turn that radio on and play some rock.
Maybe so. Maybe that's what he wanted to hear is rock. Maybe that could have been it, but play the rock, man. And I didn't do it, so he's mad. Maybe that's what it was all about, but no, I never thought of it that way. But so then I'm trying to listen, and now it's probably about, I don't know, it's probably about 6:30 in the morning. All of a sudden, this bolt of lightning, and then it starts raining real hard. I mean, it was coming down. It sounded like force was on fire because the drops were so big hitting the leaves. It just sounded like fire all out there. So now I lost all senses. I couldn't hear nothing. Yeah. So now I'm kind of blind. I'm like, I don't know what's up.
What about your friend? Is he out there in the rain, or is he up under the overhang?
He's on the cot. He's just sleeping away on the ceiling.
Getting drenched.
I never did say, but he was drinking beer all day.
Oh, okay.
So he was, he's drinking Bush Tall Boys all day. He's a drinker. That's what he was doing. See, I wasn't drinking at that point. I quit drinking right before dinner. I was done at that point. But he drank all day. I mean, this guy, he's a drinker, but he was gone out. That's why he wouldn't wake up. He was just gone, and it's just me against whatever. So anyways, I started walking back and forth, and I started saying, I got a gun, I will shoot you. I got a gun, I'll shoot you. And I was chain smoking because at that time I smoked. So I'm walking back and forth, just chain smoking, freaking out.
And if you didn't smoke, you would start.
Oh, if I didn't, you guaranteed I would have started that day. So anyways, I started a fire. You know, the fire was going, so I kind of built it up a little more, and I made a pot of coffee. I'm like, man, I need some coffee. I need some food. So I'm sitting there trying to cook, and I got the shotgun across my lap, and I'm squatted down trying to cook. And the sun's coming up, and the birds are starting to tweet. And I'm just looking out in the woods for any movement. I'm like, man, if something moves, I'm shooting it. I don't care if it's a game warden, a person, Bigfoot himself, I'm shooting it. Because whatever it was terrified me all night, and I've had enough. Well, it was about 8 o'clock, my buddy Greg finally wakes up and goes, man, what was you shooting last night? And I go, dude, I wasn't shooting. That was lightning. And I said, first of all, we had company. He goes, what do you mean company? I said, I believe Bigfoot was here last night. And he goes, well, you got your wish. And I said, no, I didn't. I wasn't looking for Bigfoot. I didn't want to have no activity with that thing. Well, you got your wish. And I said, I'll tell you what. Watch my back. I'm going to run outside this overhang, and I'm going to look above the overhang, and if there's something moving, it's going down like Flynn. I'm just shooting it down. Whatever it is, I'm shooting it down. And so he goes 45, watch my back, and then, well, I didn't see nothing. So I said, well, follow me. So we went up the trail that we come in. And when we went up the trail, that's when we found this tree that used to be 12 foot high. I think it's in one of the pictures I sent you. It's kind of tore down.
Shows. Yeah.
But what happened was, apparently it grabbed this tree about 8 foot high, and this tree's like a good 3 or 4 inches around. In other words, a man could not grab this tree at 8 foot high and do a twist snap and then pull this whole tree down to within a foot off the ground. And it was a good 12-foot tree. Pulled it all the way down the ground, about a foot off the ground. I was just like, wow.
And that's what
and
you
I
heard
said,
the
Greg,
night before.
Pardon me?
That's what you heard the night before when you were playing the
radio.
radio.
Yeah, that was that snap. That snap's when
it
must have took that whole tree down, did all one motion, just... Because, I mean, it was loud over the radio. I heard it plain as day. So then we saw these marks under the tree, and I was like, Greg, put your foot on this mark, stretch to the next one. Well, by the time he stretched out, it was still like 3 foot to the next mark, and we estimate whatever it was had about an 8-foot stride. That's what we guessed. I ain't kidding you. It was like 8-foot strides because we could see where the foot moved all the leaves and made like these little indentations. So then he goes, when he was down there, he's like, "Ooh, what's that smell?" And I went, "Ooh, what is that smell?" And it was nasty. The only way I could describe the smell to anybody is if you ever smelled somebody vomit. It was like rotten vomit. And when you smelled it, it made you want to puke. It was that vile. It was putrid. When you smelled it, you would automatically just want to go, throw up. It was that vile. So then I go, that must be the smell that people talk about that Bigfoot stinks. And he goes, oh, no, I've never smelt that before. So I said, well, let's head towards top of the overhang. Well, when we started going up the overhang, we found one print, and it looked like toes slid because the ground there had so much pebbles and dirt, you couldn't really see indentations. It was really hard ground. But you could see where it looked like toes slid, and I got a picture of it. It's on the throwaway camera picture. And I would say each toe is every bit of 2 thumbs together. That's how fat one toe was. But that's all you can make out. Well, then we went on top of the overhang, right over where I guessed it would have been standing when it sneezed. There's this pile of flies, and I got back down, and I was like, oh, that's that same smell. This is where it must have been standing. So that's where it must have been standing when it tried to sniff me out. Well, by this time it apparently left, and went back to wherever it goes for the night. And so me and my buddy, I made him breakfast. He says, there's a logging trail right down the road here. It goes to the top of the hill up here. It's actually a small little mountain. It's like the foothills of the Appalachians. They're pretty high. So I said, okay, let's go up that logging trail. Well, we get to the top of this hill, and there's an old house missing the roof and the bottom floor. It's been abandoned probably since the 50s, and the weather ate it all up. You can see where animals has been laying in and out of there over years. Then that's when my buddy said, when about 5 years ago I come up here and something took off running down there like a bear. It was all brown, but it wasn't a bear because it was too big and too wide, and it's run all fours. And I said, oh, now you tell me you've seen something freaky here. Well, that's nice. And I'm like, what do you mean? He says, that thing was like 4 feet high, and it just was going on all fours straight down because on top of the hill is a gas right-of-way where they cleared it out years ago, and it's just high grass, like 4 or 5 feet high. 5 feet high. And he said just took off that way. But I don't know what it was. It wasn't a bear, though. I'm like, well, thanks for telling me now, dude, because now you got me thinking, what else is going on around here? So anyways, we continued hiking on top of this ridge, and we went about a mile. And I kid you not, on the right side of the woods, these trees that were probably 40 or 50 feet high, but they had no low branches. And inside there, the ground cover was like interwoven with these ferns, like 3 inches long. And you could actually run around in there and probably nobody hear you because the ferns were so matted and thick in there. I never seen nothing like it. The woods, to me, remind me of like some kind of prehistoric woods. I never seen nothing like it.
Yeah, forest primeval. Yeah.
And what was even freaky about it was there's this opening. It looked like a big archway, like a big door, like 8 foot high. And I stretched out both of my arms, and that's about how wide it was, and about 8 feet high going into these woods through the brush. It's like a big old doorway, and I was like, oh, my God. This must be where they live. So we walked inside this wood.
Hold on, Mark. We're going to stop right there. We're going to take a quick break. Let's see how long is that? It's 4.5 minutes, and we'll be right back. And everyone, I want you to come back because I want to hear where this doorway leads. So everyone, we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, we're back with Mr. Mark Mills of Ohio, and he is telling us a fascinating story of an experience that he had in Wayne National Forest. And when he left off, he was talking about a forest area that had almost a natural doorway. And they were just fixing to venture off through that doorway when we had to take a break. So, Mark, if you'll pick up from there, we're all ears.
All righty. So anyways, we go in these woods, and it's 12:30 in the afternoon. I kid you not, when you walked in these woods, it was dark. And you're like, wow, I bet it's in here. So we walked further in about 20 yards. I just started shaking. I'm like, I can't be in here. We got to go. I think this is where they're sleeping in here. So we turned around and exited through the doorway, as I call it, and back across the hill, across the right-of-way, and went down the other side of the hill. And I said, let's see where this comes out. So as we're venturing down the hill, next thing we know, we're on top of the overhang where we're camping. And I'm like, oh, wow. That thing came straight down the hill. And it must be living up in that other area we were just in where I started freaking out. And I was just sitting there thinking. Well, I was like, well, let's go look at that tree again. So we went over to that tree, and we started examining the break that it did. It was like a twist snap. And on that twist snap, I found these hairs. Which I was a greenhorn. Like I said, I wasn't looking for Bigfoot at the time. I was just a greenhorn. And I grabbed it with my fingers, which that was a no-no. And then I put it inside a cellophane pack. And I said, well, I'll go back to camp. I want to look at this. And it was real white hairs. And they was fine hairs. They were white, fine hairs, real white, fine hairs. And so we went back to camp, and I wanted to look at them, and I pulled them out. And by this time, the wind was gusting a little bit, and I dropped it, and it took the hairs, and I could never find them, and I was mad. So that shows you what kind of rookie I was at the time, because I had no clue what I should have been doing. What I should have did, on hindsight, was get a saw and cut that whole section out and wrapped it up in plastic and sent it off somewhere. But when you're a greenhorn and don't know nothing, just don't think of that stuff. Because like I said, we're talking 20 years ago when it's still primitive camping. So anyways, after we got back in overhang, I'm sitting there freaking going, wow, they just come from right over the hill. Well, the next night, this is a Sunday night going into Monday morning, I didn't know what to expect that night. And Greg's girlfriend come up from Kentucky with her dog, this black Labrador. And this black Labrador started running around the woods. But when they come across these trails where it looked like the Bigfoot creature had been going that night, it smelled it, and it was it didn't even want to go back to that area. It's like, I'm done.
Mm-hmm.
So she came, and she was crying about bugs in the tent, so we made her go clean the bugs out. And she was to spend the last night with us with the dog, so her and the dog went in the tent. And Greg, I was like, Greg, you know what? I'm going to lay down for a little while, and you're on watch. So here's a pot of coffee I just brewed. Now wake me up before you go to sleep, because I don't want to be no statistic. He's like, what? I said, just do what I told you. And then by this time, it's like 10 o'clock at night. And I wanted to really lay down because I've been up for 2 days now. I'm wore out. I'm like, that thing's wore me out. Mentally wore me out. Well, just as I'm getting ready to lay down, something come running through the forest. And I mean running, doing like 35 mile an hour in the pitch dark, no light, no nothing, just running. And Greg goes, what is that? What is that? And by the time I heard it running, I already jumped up off my blow-up bed, and I got my flashlight looking down in the valley trying to see if I can see this thing. But I couldn't see nothing because back in them days, little 2D cell flashlight doesn't go very far.
No, it's not like a Mega Million.
Well, that don't even compare to LED these days, but it was like having a prehistoric. Back in them days, to give you an idea, it was like trying to look in the woods with a candle versus what you got today.
Exactly.
So I'm like, oh, my God, the thing's back. And he goes, what is that? That's a deer. And I said, dude, a deer doesn't run through the woods like a freight train pushing a refrigerator. I said, they don't do that. And then I said, besides, whenever it went down the hill, it went up the other hill at the same speed. A man could not do that. So I know it wasn't a man because there ain't no human being can go down a hill, run up the other hill, the same motion. It just doesn't work. But this thing did because that's how powerful it was. And I said, well, I guess I'm staying up another night. So I started drinking the coffee. And I said, Greg, go get in bed with your girlfriend in the tent. So he did. He went and got in the tent with his girlfriend. And I started drinking coffee and drinking coffee and drinking coffee. Well, that was at 10 o'clock. Well, at midnight, it come back the opposite way. Down the valley, up the other hill, back the way it came earlier. And I'm just like, wow, what does this thing want? What does it want? Well, then that was at midnight. Then 1 in the morning, it came from way up the hill, down the hill. Just... And then other than that, it got pretty quiet the rest of the night. So I'm sitting there the whole night trying to figure out what this thing's wanting and what's it's doing. And then as the sun's coming up, it finally dawned on me. It smelt the dog. It was trying to lure the dog out in the woods. That's what I gathered. It wanted
and
the dog to
was
come out and
none
play.
of it. Hmm.
No, that dog was in the tent with its owner. It wasn't going to come out, I guess, because, some dogs are curious and go chase anything. But I think this dog knew what it smelled, as a natural instinct earlier in the day. And I think it was like, I'm just going to lay down here and just be quiet. Because whatever that smell was, it was like an animal instinct. It knew something bad. Because it did not bark. It did not come out of the tent. Most dogs, they want to chase something, but apparently whatever that smell that had earlier, it affected that dog because it didn't make one peep squeak. And that's the conclusion I come up with the next morning. So I'm like, you know what? I've been up for 3 days. I packed my stuff, went and put it in my car because now his girlfriend was there, and she can drive him home, and I'm out of here. And so I'm like, I'm out of here. I ain't had no sleep. I'm not going to be a statistic. If they don't make it back to Columbus, I know they were bait, got eaten up, something happened to them. And on the way back to Columbus, I started passing out the wheel driving. I got to get home. And that was my very first encounter with the Sasquatch.
Wow.
Yeah, that was especially one that mimicked your name, and like I said, I wasn't even looking for it at that time. But I kept going back there the rest of that summer with other people, and that was in May. I went back June, July, and August, and didn't see nothing, didn't have any encounters. Of course, I wasn't making noise to get attracted, and I was just kind of camping out with people. Well, then in September, like I say, I can't sleep there at nighttime. I sleep during the day, but I can't sleep there at nighttime because of that first encounter. So we were there on a Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night. It was Monday morning at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I was doing my passo with my flashlight when I saw this thing. It was probably about 40 yards straight down from me. And whatever it was, I seen the silhouette. I passed it for a second. I go, what was that? That looked like a human or something. So I backed up and put my light on it, and I started studying this thing. And it was every bit of like 7 foot tall. The fur was like a Cocker Spaniel blonde. And it had fur all the way down the head, the back, the arms. I could only see up to about the waist because of the underbrush. And I'm sitting there looking at this thing going, what is that? And then as I'm studying it, I noticed how wide the shoulders were. They were 4 foot wide, and that freaked me out. That like hit me with like a brick on the head. Bing! Look at them shoulders. They were 4 feet wide, and the arms, each arm coming down, was big as 2 of my legs together. That's how big the arms were. And after about a minute and a half of keeping the light on it, it knew it was busted. And I wanted to see what it was going to do. So after it's like a minute and a half, it just squatted down into like a defense posture. That's what the Indians said they would do. Was going, when they felt threatened, they'd go in a defense posture like that. So when it did that, I freaked out, and I had to run like 20 feet away to get my shotgun, and then I ran out there, and it was gone. I didn't even hear it. I didn't see it. But then again, I did another dumb greenhorn thing. I should have just kept the light on it and see if it had turned around and looked at me. But if it probably did, I'd probably be in the hospital like them people on Boggy Creek in the mental ward at that time. So I was kind of glad I didn't see its face, but the second time I was glad it was gone because it just freaked me out. The size of the shoulders, 4 foot wide. I'm like, if that was a football player, nobody would stop him. And like I said, I guesstimated it'd be 7 foot tall. And that was my second encounter. And then about 3 years ago, me and the wife were at Salt Fork State Park because that's a lot of activity out that way, too.
I've heard that.
I took her to see this place called the Sandstone House. They built this house in the 1900s out of sandstone they were like 6 foot long, probably a half a foot or a foot wide, and probably a foot deep. And somehow they cut these sandstones and built this house. But you had to get to it from way up this hill. You had to go down this big gravel road that kind of went down and then off to the left down to the bottom. Made kind of like a dog leg, like on a golf course, kind of went straight down, then off to the left and down to the bottom. And we were with these 2 other couples. And they said, well, let's go down the stone house because after September they close it. You can't go see it, but you can go down there and look at the house through the windows and everything. And because years ago, Salt Fork used to be just a creek went through there, but they dammed it up. So there's like part of a town under that lake. But they built this house up on this ridge, kind of overlooking the lake, so it's pretty neat. So as we're going down this road, we're coming around this curve, and you can see down the bottom of the hill, and there's this patch of ornamental grass. When all of a sudden this black thing stood up, it didn't really look at us, it just stood up, turned around, and just took off, running. And what made me mad was at that time I had a camera, one of them video cameras in my hand. All I had to do is hit, record, and I would have had some footage. But it happened so fast, there was no time to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
and this thing jetted off, and it was about 4.5 foot tall. This one was totally black. And because I'm like, and when I first seen it, my mind's registering, oh, it's just a jogger. But I'm like, okay, Mark, a jogger has clothes. This is all black, furry. Think about it. So I'm sitting there, and my wife, she's just got her mouth open staring. And the only way I could describe the face of this thing, it looked like, because you can only see it like on a side view, and and that's the only way it never looked at us. And but much we could see, to me, the face kind of looked like an ape, a chimpanzee, and a human all rolled into one. That's what it looked like. And it's 4.5 feet
dark
tall.
as well.
And the face was black on this one. Yeah, it was dark, and the fur was all black. It was a black one, and when it jetted, I bet it was doing every bit of 30 miles an hour. There's no way a human was that fast. So we just continued down the hill, and there's an opening that I seen up the trail. So I started filming at the opening, but this thing was smarter than that. What it did was it ran back in the valley below us on the right, and then back up the hill the other way. It never went in the open where I'd get a shot at it. That kind of made me mad, but you just never know. It just happens that fast.
That's right.
So we got to the bottom of the hill where the ornamental grass was, well, there was this ledge, and on this ledge they had a duffel bag, and it was open. So whatever was in that duffel bag must have had the curiosity of this juvenile Sasquatch. And on the other side of the house, on the far side, was this woman, and she was taking pictures of these 3 girls. Like, I don't know, they were high school pictures or something, because they looked like high school-age girls, but we never told them what we saw or happened. And by the time our friends come around the bend, this already gone happen, so they didn't get to see it neither. And that was pretty wild to see a juvenile like that. And that was my third encounter where I actually physical seen or heard or something with the Bigfoot. And then about 2 winters ago in Adams County, I got a cabin up on this mountain ridge. And we got there about 10:30 at night, and it's in the middle of the boonies. It's near, we're like a mile from Shawnee State Forest, which is like the biggest state forest in Ohio, as far as like where you could go do a 5-day hike around the whole border, primitive hiking. And I went to turn the water on for our camp, which is like on the other side of my cabin. And the wife was on the porch, and we got this little dog. It's part Chihuahua and part Rottweiler, and it started going, rrr. And by then my wife's like, Mark, come around here. Mark, come around here. And she started crying. So finally I come back around there, I go, what's the matter? She goes, something just run across the shooting range. I said, what do you mean? She said it was all black, and it cleared it in 3 steps. It went boop, 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 right across the mountain hill. I'm like, what? So she got to experience that one. I didn't, because you have to get out in the woods in Ohio to really get in the thick of it, and, just be yourself, and you can have an encounter. You don't have to go walking for these things. They're like cats. They'll come to you. That's what I learned over these years. They're kind of curious really as a cat.
They really are. And I'll tell you something else. You're in their environment. And once you step into that environment, they're going to come check you out. I can't tell you how many times we just have pulled up to an area and just sat there, and they will show up because they hear the car, and so they'll come and they'll see what's going on.
Yeah, they'll come check you out, especially if you're making some kind of noise or hooting and howling or having a party. Mm-hmm. But
let me ask you this,
they're definitely
Mark,
real.
Have you had more sitting there waiting on them to show up, or do you do like Finding Bigfoot, go tromping off through the woods after them?
I do like them, but I got different techniques. Like I used to be able to go Salt Fork before Monster Quest came. See, Monster Quest ruined Salt Fork State Park and Finding Bigfoot because the Bigfoots used to be more cooperative and communicating with you or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But since all these years, people's gone out there and hounded on them. They're there, but they don't do like they used to because they've been hounded so much. They know what a human's doing now, so when they hear it, they just ignore it.
Well,
But,
what I want to ask you is, do you think that because researchers now know they knock, and now they've been knocking and been doing calls and trying to communicate like they do you think they've developed a different way to communicate with each other that's different than what, I mean,
I think
have
they do.
humans...
I started experiencing something new in the last 3 years when I'm out there. It's like something takes a stick and just jams it into the ground like a thump. And I've been noticing that in the last 3 years when I've been out in the woods just roaming around. You'll just hear like a thump, or something takes like a stick or a rock and just drops it on the ground or thumps it, where you can hear like a thump. It's the only way I can describe it, but I've been noticing that the last 3 years.
What about rock clacking? Have you heard anything like that?
Yes, I have. Up by my cabin, it was actually witnessed by 2 other researchers, Mike Feltner and Mike Miller. They belong to their own little Bigfoot group. Trying to think what they call themselves now. Oh, shoot. Night Stalkers. I think they're the Night Stalkers or something.
Yes, I've had them on my show, and I'm ashamed that I cannot think of. We've had so many, though. It's really hard to keep track. But yes.
Yeah, they're like the Night Stalkers. I used to research with them guys, but they went on their own thing. I'm just kind of an independent guy. I do my own thing because I found over the years when you get with big groups, then politics take over, and then somebody wants to be the leader, and then you get the infighting. You gotta go out there with a sense of mind that you want to see these things. You gotta be quiet. They'll let you know if they want you to see, but you also got to think these are creatures that we don't know nothing about. I've been doing this 20 years, and every time I think I figure them out, they do something different to blow my ears.
Oh, I know. Amen on that.
And you can't figure out, they're that intelligent that people, why we ain't got a body? Well, they ain't got a body because they're pretty intelligent. They don't, they don't want you to see them. And they live in the woods. When you go in the woods, you're going into their house. They know when you're in there. They know where you're at.
You know when you leave.
They know when you leave. They know when you come. They can hear cars. They can tell cars. They can remember what cars sound like. Like one incident when we used to be at Salt Fork, and this is a true story, was to have a pop-up camper. And me and Mike Feltner, we went out on an Easter weekend. I can't remember what year. It's been 5-6 years ago. And we would go down to a place called the Handicap Picnic Area. It's on a ridge, and that's where a lot of activity's gone down over there. It used to. It's kind of been, like I said, the Bigfoot's been disturbed so much there that it's take years for them to come back around and be normal like they were in their environment. But we would go, like one night we went out there, and we went back to our camper because we'd always stay out 3, 4, 5 in the morning. So by the time we get back to the camp, which is in the campground, the first night, Mike slept pretty hard, but I was sleeping. We've only been asleep about an hour, and something grabbed the corner of my pop-up and just started shaking it like an earthquake. Real hard and violent for about a minute, and then it started getting easier, and then it quit. And that freaked me out. I'm like, what in the world? I'm like, there ain't no earthquake here. There can't be no earthquake that shakes a camper like that. I've never experienced something like that. Well, that was on a Friday, into Saturday morning. So then Saturday we went out, come back, went to bed. Except this time I took like this nighttime Advil or something that has sleeping pills or whatever you call it, and I went to sleep. And Mike, he didn't take one that night. And the same thing again. It started shaking the camper. He's like, Mark, Mark, Mark. And then, it got lighter and it quit. Well, the third night, we're like, well, what we're going to do is have our lights and our knives, and when it does it tomorrow, we're going to be ready, because it was always like about 5:36 in the morning, like time we was trying to go to sleep. And it did it the third time, and we were so wore out from hiking all weekend, we just said, oh, well, let them rock us to sleep. We never did go out to check it out. We were too wore out by then. But that was a true story on that one.
Well,
So
let me tell you.
things,
I was going to tell you a quick story about it. It's an actual report. I think it's on BFRO in Red River County, Texas. There was a guy who was sleeping he was in a deer camp, and he was sleeping in a school bus. And he had the same thing happen to him. He was in the school bus asleep, and all of a sudden the entire bus was just rocking. Well, he thought it was his, friends messing with him. So, he'd yell at them and everything, and it'd stop, and then it'd start again. He'd yell at them, it'd stop, and then finally just got real aggravated, and he just threw back all of his sleeping bag and got up, and it's pitch dark. He goes out that door and runs right into a Sasquatch.
Oh,
and he
wow.
can't see it, but he can feel the fur on its face, on his face.
Ooh.
He just walked right into it.
Ooh.
And, yeah, I thought that was a fascinating story. And so your little camper story made me think of that. So I just thought I would share that with you. But go ahead.
I heard another guy somewhere out east do the same thing. He went out, something kept messing around his house, and he ran out there. When he did, he run right into a Bigfoot, and it was a big one, because he said he was looking at, like, where the pectorals would be, and he didn't even want to look up, and he turned around and ran back to the house. And he said,
well,
that
I don't even think this
bad.
guy could even see, because it was so dark. He couldn't see. He just felt hair in his face and
oh yeah, that would freak you
body
out
heat.
bad.
And, yeah. Oh gosh. Oh my goodness.
Especially if the stink got on you from it.
Oh yeah. But you know what I have found? That I've had several experiences of my own, and sometimes there isn't a smell, which I have found really unusual.
Yeah.
Well, most of the time there is, no doubt. But every once in a while there will be no smell at all.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why and how that works. But I have a question for you. Do you use any equipment when you go out there now? Are you trying to gather evidence, or are you just mainly an experiencer at this point?
I got three of them at East Fork on thermal image, which I ain't released to the public yet.
Oh.
It's kind of like my private thing, because
your private
over the
collection.
years I gained all kind of equipment. I got like my handy cam camera I carry with me, and I got a thermal imager, I got voice recorders, I got recordings where they throwing rocks at me and sticks at me, because I go to different areas, and when I do my research, I go to area. Sometimes I go earlier in the day and I'll get peanut butter and I'll go smear it around the trees, because they like peanut butter.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take peanut butter and go to trees and smear them here and there, and just make little sandwiches sometime and set them out. And then I'll go there and I'll do first thing I always do is like a 3 rap with a hammer or a stick against a tree. And I'll wait like 20 minutes, and then I'll do the whoop, whoop, whoop 3 times.
I was going to ask if you did any
20
calls.
minutes, and then I go,
Oh, you have to go and do that Ohio howl now.
Oh, yeah, I do all that. And if they're in the area, generally they show up because they're curious as to, hey, who's in my area? What are they doing? And they'll come.
Have they ever responded to a call, like verbally?
I've only had one ever respond. Well, actually 2. Well, 1. I had one at East Fork State Park respond to me doing a howl like that, way far away. I have it on recording. What happened was, too, I don't have a lot of pictures to send to you, was I got that blue screen of death and all my stuff went away on my hard drive.
Oh,
That upset me
no.
very bad. Years of research. Yeah, that's why I really didn't have much to send you. And I do have lots of pictures, but it'd take me a while to upload them somehow. Like take pictures like real 35 millimeter pictures. I have lots of them. Like now over the years I learned when you go out in the woods to look for different things to find out if they're in the area, like stick structures, tree structures, look for footprints, look for tree breaks, tree snaps. Like I can go in the area, I can tell you if they're around just by looking around after, I can go wandering through an area, and if they're in there, I can tell you because I can see their markings. They do all kind of weird stuff. I've got pictures of them where they made little teepees. Must have been young ones practicing. They were made like these 6 or 8 little teepees in this one 5-foot clearing area they made. Or I got where they took whole trees and shoved them in the other trees and then trees up on them. They just, in Ohio, they do all kind of these weird tree structures. If you look for them, you can find them.
Yeah, they do that here in Texas as well. They do.
Yeah, you can find them at Salt Fork if you know the areas. Well, anywhere in Ohio, if you go, you look for them, you can find them if you know what you're looking for because they do these weird stick structures. And we found a teepee one in East Fork State Park. It was probably 6 foot high, and they made this teepee like an Indian would. No excuse to or offense to the Indians, but they make like this teepee-looking thing. And every tree was ripped out of the ground or something. They weren't cut, they weren't broke. So whoever did this drug them from wherever. And
exactly.
Just all kind of stuff they do. You just got to look for it. The signs are there. You just got to look for their signs.
Well, Mark, have you ever? You've been doing this for a while now. Have you come to the point where when you're out there now, sometimes you can just sense that there's something in the area?
Yes, you can tell when they're in the area usually because it'll get deathly quiet and you'll start feeling, you'll get that, what I call it's when I get the sensation down my spine, when it gets deathly quiet and I get like this, ooh, I know something's going on. I just call it the tingling in the spine because you'll know. If they're in the area of the birds, it'll just get, when it gets deathly quiet, there's something going on. Especially
those first experiences that you have, you're just absolutely terrified. You are terrified down to your core. But then after you've been doing it for a while, do you not get a little braver or get a little less fear, get a little more comfortable? Have you found that to be true, or are you still extremely cautious?
Yeah, the longer I've done it, I face my fears, because in the beginning I kind of had like a PTSD for a while. I wouldn't tell nobody what happened and wouldn't even talk about my encounter to nobody for a while. And it was something that intrigued me. I'm like, well, if I can solve this riddle, that Bigfoot's real, then, we can bring it to the science and find out what they really are. Are they part human? Are they ape? Or, what are they? But these things I've learned over the years are highly intelligent. They're nocturnal. Like one instance, I heard them talking at my camp down. This Mike Miller said, "Hey, Mark, can I throw these rocks down the hill?" And I'm like, "Well, I really don't want you to, but go ahead." So he threw these rocks down the hill. And then he went in the cabin to change. While he's in there, I'm sitting out there, and I hear these, the only way I can describe it was like chatter, and it was like, then there was a younger one that would go, I just couldn't make it out, but they were communicating, which is weird, and I never heard that before.
Wow.
And it was, and then the rest of the night, we got bombarded by rocks all night long about the size of, I'd say about, if a 50-cent piece, imagine about two of them together. It's about that size of rocks. And I bet they threw 20 rocks at us that whole night.
Wow.
Because I just got this property, and I had it timbered, so I probably moved some Bigfoots and made them mad. Like 10.5 acres I got on the mountainside going down. And then catty corner, I got these 4 acres on top of the mountain, and I've had both of them logged. And I think they got mad at me for doing that because it was like one of the areas this group hung out.
You redecorated their house. They're not happy with you.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I take. But But they kind of backed off now since I thinned the woods out around my cabin, because they used to come right up, but now they kind of stay out there because they don't have much to hide in now. So it's like I cleared all the underbrush around, and I put these lights all around the perimeter. That's one thing they don't like is lights. So I went and got these, they
motion
take 3 C batteries, and they're motion sensor, and they're 120 lumens. So if you walk by, it kicks them on, and I got them all around my camp on the perimeter. And so one thing I've learned, like one case, me and Mike Feltner, we were out at Salt Fork, and we went way into this trail. And I sat in one chair looking over his back, and he sat in a chair looking over my back. And this other couple, Terry and Treba, they sat out in the parking lot, which was probably about a half mile out from the woods we were in. And we had on these bionic ears, and you could hear footsteps. Whenever a car or something would go by out there on the main road, you'd hear these footsteps like shh, shh, something moving around. Because them bionic ears pick up stuff like in 100 yards, but it won't pinpoint it. You just can hear it. So we kept hearing this footprint motion. Well, it was about 11:30, and Terry and Treba called us on the walkie-talkie and said, let's go to a new location. And we're like, okay, yeah, nothing's happening. Well, when we sat there, we took this pump-up lantern, and, well, actually this one was not long ago, maybe about 8 or 10 years ago, and we had the propane lantern now. But we took and put it like 30 feet away from us, so we wouldn't be getting spooked by nothing coming off the woods on that way. So we gathered up our chairs, and I went and grabbed the lantern, and we started heading out. And when I did, something that sounded like King Kong again was going. This was a Big Daddy, and it's thumping the ground. And Mike starts hollering, turn off the light, turn off the light. And I'm like, well, you want to see the thing? I don't want to see it. Leave it on, you'll see him. He's like, turn off. He started panicking back because he never heard this sound. And this is my second time. So I turned off the lantern, and when I did, guess what happened? This thing started beelining towards us. And I was like, run, run, run. So he took off running. We're running for our lives to get out of this woods out on this horse trail. So about that time, I did have one of the million candle beam lanterns, and I just threw it over my back as I'm running. And I turned it on, and I must have hit it in the eye because it stopped it dead. It just stopped it dead. And we got out.
That's character.
And he was freaking. The time we got out of there, he's like, man, that freaked me out bad. And I said,
Adrenaline
now you know
City
what I'm
there.
talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I said, now you know what I'm talking about. They're huge. Some of them are huge.
You know what? That is a great way to end the show, because we have absolutely run out of time, Mark.
Yeah. Well, the main thing I want to say to anybody out there, if you go squatch and do it, you know, start out, try to get with some people that are experienced. Just don't go out there and try to do it on your own, because you don't know what you're doing. We don't know what these things can actually do to humans. There's David Claudi's got some Missing 411 books and the movie coming out, and that's going to open a lot of people's eyes to what's in the woods, hopefully. And your best weapon at nighttime in the woods is not a gun, but I would carry bear mace and the brightest LED light you can get, because that's what'll stop them. You hit them in the eye with the light, you're getting out of there. Don't panic, hit them in the light, and if you do panic and run, put the light behind you and run as fast as you can go. These things will run you down.
Wow.
And that's your best weapon, is your light.
Thank you, Mark, for coming on Night Callers Bigfoot Radio. We certainly enjoyed it. It was a great interview, and you were fantastic. And we'd like to have you come back again, because I know you have a lot more to share. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Maybe then I can get some sounds together or something.
That would be awesome.
Some audio waves.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have you back after the first of the year. Would that be all right with you?
Yeah, that'll work, because I got a lot more information. But what I'm telling people now, if you're ever in the woods, get lost in the woods, you're Flashlight is your buddy. That
right.
will get you out of the woods.
Very, very good advice. Very good advice. Well, folks, we want you to come back and see us next week. We're going to have Alex Hearn from Arizona. And enjoy your holidays. Be careful. And we'll see you next week, everyone. Good night.
Good night. God bless everybody.
Good night.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Thanks,
Facebook
Mark.
me when you want to come back.
You bet. I sure will. And be looking for it.
Text me. All right. We'll talk to you later.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Good
Bye-bye.
night.